Good afternoon, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Friday to you. We are going to chat about what's left of Debby here and how it's going to be impacting the East. But we have another threat to take a look at here across the main development region at the Atlantic that could be something we need to watch more closely next week, not only in the Caribbean, but on the East Coast as well. So I'm going to talk about what is to be expected here, and that is our next potential system, Ernesto, likely to form here probably the beginning part of next week near the Caribbean, somewhere near the Leeward Islands or the Greater Antilles, including Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and even Hispaniola. The East Coast needs to watch this. I'm going to talk about some steering currents and what may happen, but until it forms, all the model guidance that we're looking at right now is subject to change. So do know it's a little bit too soon to get too specific here, just that we do need to keep an eye on things here next week. Here's a look at our current look from Zoom Earth, and you can see the track of Debby here now speeding up significantly. A couple days ago, it was only moving at about 3 miles per hour, now accelerating and merging with a trough at moving at 37 miles per hour, quite a bit quicker. And that will accelerate into New England this afternoon and then into Eastern Canada and merge with a front over the weekend. So we'll be out of our hair pretty soon. The front that's with it here is going to take a little bit more time to move through it. So we'll stay a little bit unsettled over parts of the Carolinas and Southeast over the next few days. In the Pacific, we do have Amelia, which is falling apart, a new area to watch here that could clip parts of southwestern Mexico. And then in the West Pacific, we have severe tropical storm Maria, which is starting to weaken and will be turning into a remnant low moving through northern Japan. Another area to keep an eye on as well. But really, most of the activity to be concerned with is out here in the Atlantic and our next tropical wave, which now has a 60% chance of developing. The National Hurricane Center says pretty good chance as we get towards the beginning to second part of next week that this will be at least a tropical depression. And the area potential development ranges from 45 west all the way to about 75 west when this could become that named system or at least a tropical depression. So until that happens, all the data we're going to be looking at for a while here is still going to be very speculative. We're not going to quite have a strong feel yet for how this may play out. But certainly conditions are favorable for hurricane development here if this does track close to the Bahamas. Here's a look at the East Coast, and you can see the remains of Debby moving very quickly off to the north and east. We will still have a little bit of severe weather here in the warm sector, maybe some tornadoes to deal with this afternoon. And we do have some locally heavy rain tailing off into the Carolinas as well. Actually, a little bit of a weakness forming off the East Coast. It should not become anything tropical, but may continue to enhance rainfall rates in South Florida and in the Bahamas. That's a look of the East Coast of the United States. Here's the water vapor image as well, and you can see Debby here as well as a mid-level low, both of which are getting pushed off to the north and east. This is the mid-level low. It's going to accelerate this way. Here's the remains of Debby and accelerating northeast as this big trough digs into the eastern U.S. and kicks everything along to the east. But what you will see is there is an area of high pressure building down in this direction, and where that ends up being focused next week is going to mean a big difference in what our next system is going to be doing. Here's another look at Debby real fast here, and the visible satellite image shows some peaks in the cloud cover across portions of the eastern Carolinas and up into the Chesapeake Bay area. And sorry for that jumpiness here, but you can see a little bit of sun popping out as well as thunderstorms developing in eastern PA. We do have a tornado watch in effect this afternoon, something we're going to be tracking here for you very closely. And you can see most of the heavy rain moving through upstate New York, the Finger Lakes region dealing with some flash flooding right now. And in the warm sector, we do have to keep an eye on things here as well as instability begins to pick up and we start to see more potential rotating cells here. They're not going to be strong tornadoes, but there will be potential tornadoes that move pretty quickly. So you can see our area of heavy rain will leave upstate New York and Pennsylvania this evening. It'll move up through Maine and into eastern Canada. Lingering boundary here could produce some showers and storms tomorrow afternoon and evening, but it won't be nearly as widespread or as heavy. And then as we head into Sunday, here comes our front, and not much setup for the time being, but as we get later into the day, we should start to see more showers and storms in portions of the southeast. Interestingly, let me reload this because that is not looking right. There we go. We do have a moderate risk for flash flooding over the Poconos through upstate New York into parts of the St. Lawrence Valley. Slight risk for flooding across all of the East Coast from near Charleston up through Virginia, the Chesapeake Bay area, and all the way up into western Maine here for the rest of today. Tomorrow, that risk of flooding fortunately goes away. We may still have some heavier storms in areas that are waterlogged right now from Georgia into eastern North Carolina. So some additional flooding possible, but the worst has passed here in the Carolinas. Here's a look at our rain through the weekend. Projected amounts as high as 3 to 6 inches across upstate New York and the St. Lawrence Valley. The big cities of the Northeast, though, probably an inch or less. Some severe weather will be possible, but the worst of the rain should be gone. And looking a little bit farther south, let me move us down into the Carolinas. You can see there's still a threat for heavy rain here over parts of the Low Country and eastern North Carolina, perhaps even 3 to 4 more inches of rain between this morning and Sunday night. We do have river flooding concerns, though, in the wake of our storm. The areas in purple are already dealing with major river flooding, including Lumberton on the Lumber River. That area flooded quite a bit during Florence and Matthew, and unfortunately is flooding again here in North Carolina. As we get into the weekend, we do have to watch the flood gauges up in here across our rivers. They are coming up in the Potomac region, as well as on the Severn River in Annapolis and the northwestern branch of the Patapsco near the Baltimore area. So we do have some flooding beginning right now, but what is to be forecast is that additional flooding will happen here where it's been so wet and river stages are high. And primarily a problem, I think, in Pennsylvania and western Maryland, but also upstate New York, all the way up into New England. Do keep an eye on this as the rivers are already high. The other concern is that all this water that has fallen in the Piedmont region of North Carolina, all the way up into the Shenandoah Valley, all that water is flowing down these rivers towards the Atlantic, and we could see significant flooding on the Tar River again around Lewisburg, the Neuse River around Clayton and Goldsboro, and some of the smaller rivers, including the Cape Fear River and the Little PD River as well. So it's probably going to be at least the weekend before we see any improvement in these river stages. That's something I definitely am concerned about. If you do live on any of those rivers, please take this flooding seriously as it is not finished. We do have a 5% chance for tornadoes this afternoon and evening. Eastern Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Philly area, all the way up to the Poconos and towards the capital region of New York, and a slight chance for tornadoes all the way up into Vermont and New Hampshire here as this tropical system continues to move quickly off to the north and east. I don't think we're going to be dealing with stronger tornadoes. I would not rule an EF2 out, but at this point, probably quick-moving tornadoes that form and then die just as quickly. And you can see here on our model guidance this afternoon, we still have this threat across Delaware and South Jersey and the Philly area, but things should quiet down pretty quickly. Farther north and east, we will start to get pretty unsettled here. Eastern PA, Delaware Valley this afternoon, heading into the Hudson Valley later in the afternoon. Keep an eye on these cells. We will probably see a few tornadoes here. Some will be wrapped in rain, and that threat will start to diminish towards 7, 8 o'clock across western Connecticut and Long Island. But the threat is not zero at this point. So that's all I'm really going to say about Debby. By this time, tomorrow's video, I think we're just going to be focusing on the next system. If you look at the Western Caribbean and Gulf, things are pretty well behaved. We do have a tropical wave moving into the Yucatan and Belize. This will continue and has pretty much no chance of developing across the Gulf of Mexico. And then things are pretty quiet behind it for a few more days. So really, it's the next system that we have to be focusing on at this point. And you can see right now, not very organized. The circulation center, very broad at this point, near 35 west. It is going to head, generally speaking, in this direction, probably north of Barbados and aimed maybe towards Guadeloupe or Martinique or even Dominica, these islands in here. But again, until it forms, there's still quite a bit of uncertainty. So I'm going to talk about that here. Let me get this off the screen and show you the visible satellite. While this is, all right, I said 4 times, I'm sorry. While this image shows that we have quite a bit of thunderstorm activity, you also see that there's still quite a bit of dry air coming in from Africa here, and this dry air is impinging on our system and keeping it from developing. Now, as it gets to about 55 to 60 west in here, it should escape the dry air and be in an environment with more moisture, with warmer ocean waters, and in a place where things can develop. If you remember Beryl from last year, it was in very warm waters in here, but really ramped up in this portion of the Atlantic Ocean approaching the Caribbean. It took its time, but once it did, it developed very quickly. Behind this wave, we are going to watch additional waves, but this one has the best chance of developing for the time being. If you look at the ensemble possibility for development, it's climbing all the way up to 70 to 80% by next Monday, just east of the islands, and then 70 to 80% over the islands on Tuesday. Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, 70%, a little bit less as we get divergence in where the models take this. All the ensembles take it, but possibility this will be impacting Hispaniola, the Turks and Caicos, and the Bahamas as we get to next Thursday. And then a week from today, things do obviously spread out here as the uncertainty grows in our potential track. This is the Madden-Julian oscillation. And right now we are heading through phase one of it, meaning that there's a lot of lifting over the Western Hemisphere and Africa, but we are heading into a more favorable spot here where next week we'll be into phase two and even three, and then the following week heading towards phase four. These phases in here are the ones that favor landfalls in the United States. In fact, phase four in particular is the one that would favor Florida and the East Coast. So we are heading in that direction. Now, it's just a phase diagram. It's just a forecast. There's certainly concern that this would get stuck in 2 or down in 3, and that may change the game here. But right now, it is certainly heading in that direction. And if you look at Eric Webb's tweet here, you can see that the density of storms in phase 4 is extremely high across the Gulf, the Bahamas, and Florida. So if we do head into that direction, we are going to be in a much more favorable spot. Here's a look at ensembles from the European earlier on, and you can see a weak system until we get to about Tuesday and Wednesday. Then we may have some development. Now, the systems or the ensembles that develop this more quickly will tend to recurve the system faster and may threaten Bermuda, but not necessarily the U.S. The ones that take longer are the ones we need to be more concerned with, because remember, Debby took a while to develop and as a result came out on this side of Cuba into the Gulf. Now, right now, the European ensembles, generally speaking, stay over or east of the Bahamas, and most recurve the system. But there are some that keep the system weaker. Maybe it just doesn't quite get going just that fast, or it interacts with Hispaniola and Cuba, which have a lot of mountains. And if that happens, then we definitely don't want to just close the book on Florida or the Gulf of Mexico at that point, or even the southeast coast. So a lot of uncertainty here. The GFS ensembles have some similar uncertainty. This is going to get very crowded, but just kind of keep an eye on things here. You can see the stronger solutions that have a stronger hurricane recurve towards or even east of Bermuda, but the weaker solutions are obviously going to be more of a problem for the East Coast. And here is where the earlier GFS ensembles were taking things, with some solutions going into Florida and the Gulf, and many coming up towards the Carolinas or even east of the Carolinas. Now, I will show you this, and please don't freak out. This is one model, but something that we do need to be watching. The European develops this system as it gets towards the islands here Monday night, Tuesday morning, and takes it north of Hispaniola. And you can see that it's turning well to the east of the Bahamas as a hurricane by the end of next week. What happens after is of concern. You see this big area of high pressure here forecast to build into eastern Canada. The ocean waters up in here are between 4 and 8 degrees Fahrenheit above the average. If high pressure builds into this area, it will be fueled by that much above average water temperature, and this ridge could end up being stronger. And as a result, we definitely don't want to rule out the East Coast yet, because this solution is very much in play. And if you take a look here more closely at the European, you can see from earlier today, it is not a threat to the southeast coast. It may threaten Bermuda, but you can see a likely hurricane. And then take a look at this as we get into later next week. And again, this is still 7, 8, 9 days away. It's probably going to change quite a bit. You can see that it, in fact, tries to move back towards the East Coast around New England and Atlantic Canada. Again, 10 days away, much is going to change. I like to watch trends, not any individual model. The goal is not to scare people unnecessarily until we know exactly what may happen. And there's going to be more time before that even is a possibility. The European control from earlier shows coming up close to the East Coast of North Carolina as well. And then you'll see as I continue that, does in fact take it up into New England. Now, this was yesterday's 12Z run. The model run following it, of course, was still trying to bend back, but farther east and affecting Nova Scotia. And I don't have the 12Z from today just yet. Now, the earlier GFS from today is a little bit more concerning for the southeast. You can see, and I'll zoom in here a minute, but you can see high pressure is a little stronger. This develops a little bit later, and this would be a threat to at least the Outer Banks and then Atlantic Canada. Here's a closer look here at what this earlier GFS run was showing. A pretty decent hurricane, strengthening as it comes up very close to Cape Hatteras and then beginning to bend away. Certainly not a fish storm if that's correct. And then here's an extension of that model. And you can see coming up very close to the Outer Banks, very close to southeast New England, although far enough not to bring us a direct hit. And then by Tuesday the 20th, moving along the coast of Nova Scotia. That was the 6Z. Don't be upset with me, but the 12Z is not very encouraging, unfortunately. If you take a look at it here, you will see that it is later to develop the system, and we're seeing somewhat of a trend here with the GFS, where the longer these systems take to develop, the less likely they're going to form and move more to the right and bend away and become fish storms. This particular system keeps it weak until it gets over the Bahamas and then strengthens it to a hurricane. And you can see here it has actually a landfall coming near Cape Fear, near Topsail Island, and up to Jacksonville, North Carolina, and then tracking away from the East Coast. So a lot of time, obviously, to watch this system, but in general, the European develops it quicker, curves it towards Bermuda, then tries to maybe bring it back towards New England. The European controls are also threatening New England at this point, and the GFS from earlier brushing North Carolina, then heading out to sea. The one after it, unfortunately, farther to the west. But again, until this system forms, we have a lot of unknowns. I do think it will be a hurricane. Water temperatures are supportive. The wind shear is lower, but where that happens at this point is still to be determined. And that's why this graphic has 3 possible arrows. None of these is guaranteed to happen yet until this system forms in a few days in this part of the country, or in this part of the world. So anyway, hurricane likely. Watch on the East Coast. Keep an eye on Florida as well. Certainly watch in Atlantic Canada and Bermuda. And if you're in the islands right now in the Caribbean, I would begin to prepare for at least a weaker tropical system. Not another hurricane barrel, but a weaker system at this point. Well, I appreciate y'all's time today. I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please consider becoming a subscriber of mine and share with your friends as well, especially those of you in the Caribbean. I thank you for your time, and I am a believer. I'm a Christian. I give all the glory to God, and I pray over the safety of everybody in the path of these storms. And the reason why is because so much has been done for me. John 15:7 says, "If ye abide in me and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. Herein is my Father glorified, that ye bear much fruit, so shall ye be my disciples. As the Father hath loved me, so have I loved you. Continue ye in my love. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full." And the reason I became a Christian was that I was having a big void in my life. I was missing the joy that I saw a lot of people have. And the reason why is I was trying to fight every battle myself, trying to please everybody, not realizing that there was something greater out there for me. And once I became a believer, that love was given to me. I understood exactly what I was getting into and the decisions I was making. And I understood that I would be redeemed from my sins one day when I am here to meet Jesus in heaven. And I pray that that's the case that you have as well. That's your belief. But if it's not, you are still welcome. You are still in my prayers. You still matter. Just know that I believe that there are greater things in store for you. Hope you guys have a great Friday. We'll catch up with you again tomorrow. Take care.